Okay, let's talk about Acts 14. When we left off from Acts 13, we had started from Syrian Antioch to Seleucia to Salamis on the island of Cyprus, crossed to Paphos, where they ran into the sorcerer and the proconsul, and then up to Attalia, to Perga, to Pisidian Antioch, where they shook off their sandals on their way out. Now they're going to go to a place called Iconium, with an I. After that, they'll go to a place called Lystra, and then a place called Derbe. And what they'll do is they'll hit those places, and then they'll retrace their steps on the way back without hitting the island of Cyprus. Once they get to Attalia, they'll actually go this way, just sail right into Seleucia and then up to Syrian Antioch. Okay? So from Pisidian Antioch, they go to Iconium. All right, so Iconium works out like a lot of places do, and that is where a bunch of people believe them and a bunch of people don't. And by and large, it's the Gentiles who are really pretty ecstatic about the news, and Jews that are fighting it. Not in all cases, but in a lot of the cases. And when they get to Iconium, they really have a lot of pushback, and it causes both Paul and Barnabas to really push back against their pushback, and they really spoke boldly because they are so emboldened by some of the things that have happened to them so far. The people there wanted to stone them, mistreat them is what they say, persecute them. So they get wind of that and they take off. All right. Now, we talked about different areas, and we were just in Pisidian Antioch, where it's a town, Antioch, in a place called Pisidia. Now, there's a place called Lycaonian. Well, they're the Lycaonian cities in Lycaonia. And these Lycaonian cities, like I said, are Lystra and Derbe. Lystra kind of sounds Dutch. Terpstra, Dijkstra, Heemstra, Lystra, but it's not Dutch. And there's a crippled man, and he's never been able to walk ever. God heals him through Paul, and there is one of those verses there where it says, Paul looked directly in him, saw that he had the faith to be healed. But again, it is not your faith, the strength of your faith, that heals you. And so God heals him through Paul. And these people go berserk, and they start treating Paul and Barnabas like Zeus and Hermes. Zeus and Hermes. Well, those are gods from the pantheon, that means a whole group of gods, from the Greeks. And Zeus being the top dog, they thought Barnabas was Zeus. Maybe because they think Barnabas was big and strong, kind of a big guy. And Hermes was always the messenger, sort of the talker. And that would definitely be Paul. And so they call them these gods. Why? Because they healed? Well, yeah, they healed, but also there's a legend in this town that years before, the gods came down in human form and walked through their town, and no one recognized them as gods except for an old couple. And they did not want to make that mistake again because they felt cursed ever since that time that these gods had come down to visit them, and they didn't treat them well. They didn't treat them like gods, and they missed their opportunity. And so this legend goes that, if they ever come again, we're really going to treat them well. So there's a temple just outside because the patron saint, pretty much every one of these towns that built a temple had a certain god that they, expressed their devotion to in that town. We talked about the god Nike and these different ones. But in this town, it was Zeus. So just outside the town, there was a temple to Zeus. So the priest of that temple said, hey, let's go sacrifice a whole bunch of bulls to them. Well, remember what happened to Herod when he didn't right away deflect people's praise of him, calling him a god. And Paul and Barnabas were like, oh no, they're going to treat us like gods. So they do the thing that a Jew does when he's super serious and ticked off about something, and they rip their robes, their cloaks, Remember, the high priest did that when Jesus was on trial, when he committed blasphemy in the eyes of them. We know it wasn't, but so they ripped their robes like, no, 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 no. And they go out in the crowd and say, please don't, 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 don't. And they were still having a hard time getting them to not sacrifice to them. Then some people from the town before, Iconium and Pisidian Antioch, came to the town to sort of follow them and say and make up things about them and turn part of the town against them. And anyway, they actually got them really, really ticked off with these guys. You might say, well, wait a minute. They just treated them like a god. Now they go way the other way and really mistreat them? Well, we saw that before. Jesus was praised as he came in the week of Passover. And then by the end of the week, they crucified him. Why? Well, when you get people's emotions really high, they tend to ride up and down. And they probably felt really stupid when all of a sudden they treated these guys like gods and they realized that they weren't. So they actually stoned Paul. Now, stoning took place in different ways, but sometimes with the stoning, they didn't just make a circle and chuck it at him until he's dead. They would, in some situations, they'd put him down in a pit, and if you felt wronged by this person, you would walk up to the edge of the pit and you drop a rock or throw a rock on that person. Now, depending on how offended you were, might determine the size of the rock you pick up. If you really felt this guy had offended you, you picked up a big rock. If you're like, whatever, picked up a small rock. And if you had a big rock and you really felt offended, you might throw it hard. But a lot of times they had it where you really weren't supposed to look at the rock hit him. You just threw it and turned away. So it could be that you did survive a stoning. They did think he was dead. His buddies pulled him outside of town, and then he's revived. And what does he do? Once he's revived, he goes back into the city. And there might be two reasons for that. Number one, he's just a stud, and he has no fear, which probably is part of it. The other thing is the Romans, the Greco-Roman culture, were the first ones to come up with the term double jeopardy. They didn't call it that, but we have that today too. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. So if he was convicted for blasphemy or whatever on the grounds of what he had said here, and he survives the stoning, he goes back in, they can't touch him because he's already survived the sentence that came with what he had committed. All right, and then they go off to, from Lystra, they go off to Derbe, and they win a whole bunch of people over to the Lord, and then they head back through all the towns that they went through. And one important thing that they did on the way back is they appointed elders in the churches to keep things going and to keep everybody on the straight and narrow. So then they go back and then they skip the island on the way back, and they get to Syrian Antioch. That's where they're going back to, and they get to tell everybody about what happened there. All right, that's the end of 14.